Hello everyone. Tonight we walk into the making of a space marine. You stand in the streets of a hive city where the smog tastes like rust and ash, where gangs bleed each other in the alleys, and where survival past the age of 12 already marks you as tougher than most citizens of the Imperium. Somewhere above you, a robed chaplain walked. Cheers, somewhere deeper, a servitor records your movements. You have been seen, judged, and marked. This is the beginning of the recruitment into the Adeptus Astartes, and if you're listening closely, you probably won't survive this so. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. Drop your location and the current time in the comments. And so the wheel of fate turns again. Sacrifice has been made. The first key has turned, and mankind takes one step closer to the light of the throne. This is not the end. This is only the candidates in its own way. You come from three broad backgrounds. Hive worlds breed the toughest from billions, where survival is a lottery of violence. Feudal worlds raise warrior nobles who grow up with sword in hand and loyalty drilled from birth. Death worlds gift you feral hunters who live every day fighting predators or poisoned air. The Black Templars prefer zealots from feudal knights, the Catachanborn, when they are rarely chosen, often feed the gene seed of jungle specialist chapters. Lore masters still debate whether the Emperor designed this spread deliberately, or whether the chapters simply learned to favor the stock that gave them the highest survival rates. The process is not a polite invitation. Astartes do not ask. They take. Recruitment often comes in the form of a raid. Thunderhawks descend. Chaplains chant litanies, and youths are dragged from families without explanation. Historians still argue whether this is mercy or cruelty. Better to be stolen by angels of death than rot in a factory line. Either way, your fate was never yours to choose. You are not the only one taken. In fact, hundreds may be lifted in a single sweep. Only a fraction will survive to wear armor. The rest will. Let's say the apothecaries find use for them in organ harvesting, servitor conversion, or target practice for existing scouts. That's the punchline of Imperial recruitment. Most kids end up as spare parts. Your age matters. Most chapters look for boys between 10 and 14. Younger. And the implants won't take older. And the body resists. The blood angels famously tried to implant older aspirants during desperate times, but the results were catastrophic mutations, feeding their curse. This is why your childhood, short as it is, ends the moment you are taken. The ritual differs depending on the chapter's culture. On fairness, the space wolves drink from a cup of raw, dean-laced blood under the aurora. A tradition that kills more than it converts. On Nocturne, the salamanders choose from among the strongest smiths and hunters, dragging them into trials of fire and beasts. On Ultramar, the recruitment process is cleaner, more clinical though no less brutal. A small bit of trivia: the White Scars sometimes recruit by hunting initiates across the open plains. If you are caught, you die. If you escape, you ride with them. It's less a test of loyalty and more a test of whether you can keep pace with warriors who live in the saddle. You are placed in holding cells or barracks, shoulder to shoulder with others. The air is heavy with sweat, fear, and a sense of destiny. Some cry, some fight, some stare blankly, already be broken. You don't talk much, you just wait. Chaplains and apothecaries circle like predators. They whisper prayers, administer injections, and study reactions. They are not looking for a kindness or intelligence. They want obedience, resilience, and a body that can be rebuilt into something stronger. One cough, one stumble, one hesitation may mark you for removal, and then heat testing begins. The call to recruitment is only the threshold. Ahead lies the gauntlet of trials that will decide who among you has the right to live and who becomes just another number in the chapter. As long ledger of failures, the brutal trials come, quickly, leaving you no time to breathe. You were dragged from your old life only days ago, yet now you are stripped of name, family, and softness. What matters is survival, and survival here is not. About luck, it is about proving your body can be torn apart and rebuilt while your mind stays intact. The first test is simple: hunger. You are relocked in a chamber with nothing but stale water. No food for 3 days. Sometimes a week. The weak collapse, knowing their own fingernails or screaming at shadows. The chaplains call it purification. But you know it is weeding if you cannot. Endure an empty belly. You will never survive the surgeries ahead. Once you stagger out, you are thrown into physical trials. Think of it as gym class designed by sadists, running until you vomit, lifting stone blocks until bones crack, climbing cliffs without ropes while instructors aim lost fire near your feet. Some die here, broken spines, shattered skulls, or simple exhaustion. Their bodies are dragged away without ceremony. Lore masters still debate whether these trials are designed to test discipline or simply to thin numbers. Some argue that chapters waste too many, recruits through needless cruelty. Others counter that only those willing to suffer without question can be trusted with the Emperor's gene seed. Historians still argue whether the Emperor himself approved such methods, or if these were later inventions of his sons. Then comes combat testing. You are pitted against other aspirants. Wooden sticks, stone blades, or bare fists, it doesn't matter. You fight until one can't stand. Victories matter less than attitude. A boy who refuses to yield but still loses may be chosen. A boy who wins with arrogance may be discarded. You learn quickly. Humility and fury must walk together. Trivia for you: the Raven Guard sometimes leave aspirants in forests stocked by servo skulls fitted with tranquilizers. If you are tagged, you are out. If you evade for 7 days, you are in. Some whisper that more die from the cold and starvation than from the skulls. After combat, entrance trials break you further. Deathworld recruits maybe, forced to cross toxic swamps or volcanic ash plains. Hive-worlders are dumped in artificial underhives, told to survive without food or light on some feudal worlds. Recruits must hunt predators, bare-handed, and return with proof of the kill. Think of it as Survivor, except with no cameras, no prize money, and no mercy. One test is mental. You are strapped to a chair, hooded, and whispered to for hours by chaplains. They ask questions about loyalty, faith, and fear. Some aspirants scream blasphemies under pressure. Others break into sobbing confessions. Those are taken away. Nobody says where. Those who keep silent, repeating only prayers, survive. The apothecaries also test your biology. Blood samples, muscle tissue, bone density, all are measured against the chapter's requirements. If your body rejects their standards, you are discarded. A sterile word for a very final act. The apothecaries claim nothing is wasted. Organs harvested from failures sometimes go back into stockpiles for servitors. Efficiency is the Imperium's cold kindness dot at night. You lie in cold cells, surrounded by boys who may not wake up tomorrow. Some whisper their old names, trying to cling to identity. Others already call each other brother. You remain silent, because deep down you suspect half of tea. Hem won't survive another week. Historians still argue whether these trials are fair. Could there be a gentler way to build a space marine? Probably. But fairness is not the Imperium's concern. Efficiency is out of hundreds. Perhaps 10 will remain. And from those 10, maybe 5 will live long enough to wear scout armor. The rest die here, or later, on the operating slab. One joke wisp. Read among scouts, the first trial is easy, just breathe. The second is harder, keep breathing, grim humor. But it sticks, as the trials continue. You stop thinking like a boy. Hunger, pain, and fear hollow you out. In their place grows a different fire. Not hope, not joy, just a stubborn refusal to die. And that refusal is what the chapter truly wants. Because only when you refuse death at EV. Every corner, are you ready for the next step? Surgery, the implants, the slow, painful stripping away of humanity. The gene seed implantation begins when you are dragged from the trial fields and placed onto a steel table. No prayers, no gentle words, just the smell of antiseptic mixed with incense. You are not told what will happen. But the truth comes quickly when the first incision is made. Here apothecaries begin the work of turning you into something no longer human. Lore masters still debate whether the Emperor designed the gene seed as a gift or as a curse. Some argue it was his attempt at mass-producing demigods, others that it was simply a practical way to create reliable soldiers. What's certain is that without it, the Space Marines would not exist. Each organ they implant into you has a precise function, and each is a copy. Grown from genetic material dating back 10,000 years to the Primarchs themselves, the process is not gentle. The apothecaries cut you open, slide in glands, stitch, and leave you to heal. No anesthesia, just restraint straps and whispered catechisms. The implants number 19 in total. Not all chapters use everyone, but most follow a similar pattern. 1. Secondary heart gives you redundancy. If one fails, the other keeps you alive. 2. Osmodular alters bone growth, fusing your skeleton into dense armor. 3. Biscopia increases muscle density and strength. 4. Hemestamen modifies blood to carry more oxygen. 5. Laramann's organ seals wounds instantly with coagulant tissue. 6. Catalepsy node lets you rest half your brain while the other stays. Alert. 7. Preomna neutralizes poisons before they can kill you. 8. Homophagia allows you to gain memories from eating flesh. 9. Multilung lets you breathe poison gas or water. 10. Oculobe sharpens vision, even in darkness. 11. Lyman's ear, perfect balance, resistance to dizziness. 12. Susan membrane places you in suspended animation when wounded. 13. Melanogram adjusts skin to resist radiation and light. 14. Woolitic kidney filters toxins with unmatched efficiency. 15. Neuroglottis taste becomes chemical analysis, useful for a battlefield. Toxins. 16. Mucranoid glands that release protective secretions under command. 17. Betcher's gland lets you spit corrosive acid. Yes, really. 18. Progenoid glands store and reproduce gene seed for future recruits. 19. Black Karapochi, the final implant, linking you to power armor. Some of these are installed early, others later. The process can take years. You are not transformed in one night. You are broken apart, slowly, painfully, and forced into a new shape. Historians still argue whether all 19 are truly needed. Some chapters, like the Raven Guard after the Horus heresy, lost the ability to properly replicate certain organs. Others, like the Black Dragons, suffer mutations from unstable gene seed. Sprouting bone blades, the Adeptus Mechanicus claims to guard the purity of gene seed. But their record is riddled with contradictions. The trivia here: one implant, the homophagia, is infamous for battlefield cannibalism. Space Marines have been recorded eating the flesh of slain enemies to learn their habits. Some chapters ban the practice, calling it barbaric. Others embrace it as efficient. Picture a Space Marine chewing on a Xenos and calling it recon. That's real for you. Each surgery brings agony, The osmodula makes your bones ache as they lengthen and fuse. The biscopia twists muscle fibers until you feel them tear. The Larraman's organ heals cuts so fast that scars vanish in hours, but the process burns like fire. Sleep offers no escape. Some implants trigger night terrors and hallucinations. You watch fellow aspirants die on the table. Some bleed out, others reject the organs. Their bodies convulse until their hearts burst. Apothecaries do not mourn. They simply remove the organs and prepare them for reuse if viable. Efficiency again. At this stage, you start losing track of who you were. Your voice deepens, bones crack as they thicken, and hunger gnaws at you constantly as your metabolism accelerates. Food is shoved into you in monstrous quantities. Feudal recruits, once proud of swordplay, now hunch in pain as their spines warp. High recruits, already gaunt, swell into something broader, and through it all, chaplains whisper, not comfort commands. You are told this pain is the Emperor's will. You are told to endure because weakness is heresy. You do not have to believe, but you do have to obey. By the time you can stand again, you are taller, stronger, and heavier. Your reflection no longer looks like a boy. The shell of your old life has cracked. The brutal truth. You are halfway human, halfway prototype. But the implants are only the beginning. The real suffering comes when your body starts rejecting pieces of itself. When mutations bloom, and when survival turns into a coin toss, and that is where you go next. The pain of transformation settles in long after the scalpels are put away. At first, you think the surgeries were the hardest part, being cut open, stitched back, and stuffed with organs you never asked for. But the real struggle begins when your body tries to reject what it has been forced to accept. The osmodula stretches your bones, sometimes unevenly. Your legs ache so much you can barely walk. Some aspirants collapse into seizures as their spines thicken to fast. The biscopia bulks your muscles in days instead of years, tearing tissue as it grows. Your skin splits in places, healed only by the new glands pumping Larraman's coagulants. You smell of iron and antiseptic constantly. Sleep brings no relief. Dreams are filled with screaming nerves. Lore masters still debate whether the Emperor intended this torment. Some claim it was a flaw in design, that no mortal body was meant to accept such rapid change. Others argue it was deliberate, that only through pain would aspirants shed weakness. Historians still argue whether the primarchs themselves endured similar agony or were simply grown perfect. In their gene vats, no records survive, and the Mechanicus isn't talking. The first major wave of deaths comes here. Implants fail. The Hemastamen twists blood chemistry until organs rot. The multi-lung collapses under its own weight. A child can go to sleep breathing fine and wake up suffocating. Apothecaries work quickly, sometimes carving out the failed organ to give the aspirant another chance. More often, they shake their heads and call for disposal. Trivia for you. In the early days of the Imperium, the Iron Hands were infamous for discarding failures immediately, often turning them into cybernetic servitors rather than wasting time on salvage. Other chapters, like the Salamanders, risked multiple surgeries to save even one aspirant. The contrast between cruelty and compassion remains sharp across the Adeptus Astartes. You see mutations too. The Melanogram, designed to shield you from radiation, can run rampant. One aspirant's skin turns jet black, cracking like obsidian. Another grows patches of scaled hide. The apothecaries debate, purge or preserve. Sometimes mutations are tolerated if they don't hinder performance, sometimes even minor. Flaws lead to termination, and then there are the progenoids, the most prized implants. They are installed last, buried deep in your chest and neck. Their only purpose is to harvest viable gene seed. For future generations, you realize the chapter values not you, but the organs inside you. If you die tomorrow, those glands will be cut out and stored, your body forgotten, That knowledge haunts you, more than the pain. Some aspirants snap under the strain. They claw at their own skin, screaming about parasites inside them. Others beg to be killed. The chaplains respond with litanies, branding irons, or simply silence. You understand now. Failure is not only physical. It is also mental. Endurance means ignoring terror as much as enduring agony. Historians still argue whether. Rejection rates are exaggerated. Some records claim only 1 in 10 aspirants reach full transformation. Others suggest closer to 1 in 5. The truth likely varies by chapter. Further, Ultramarines, with their stable gene stock, survival is higher. For cursed lines like the Blood Angels or Space Wolves, the odds are far worse. Through all of this, you feel your humanity peeling away. Your voice cracks into a deeper timbre. Your appetite grows monstrous. You eat raw protein bricks by the kilogram. Your height surges past 2 meters. Clothes no longer fit. Your skin feels alien. Some aspirants whisper to each other at night. We are becoming monsters. Nobody corrects them. One joke circulates in hushed tones. You're not you when you're hungry. You're worse. It's bitter humor, shared while chewing tasteless ration paste. And yet, amid the misery, his strange pride grows. Every time you survive a fever, every time you wake after another surgery, you prove the Emperor's design has not broken you. You begin to believe you might survive. Not because you are stronger than others, but because you simply refuse to die. But survival alone is not enough. Pain shapes the flesh, but the mind must be shaped too. You cannot march into battle as a half-formed beast. You must be bound by ritual, faith, and the iron cult of your chapter. That is where the next phase leads you into the shadow of shrines, under the endless words of chaplains, where belief is hammered into your skull as surely as bone is reforged in your body. The cult of the chapter wraps around you the moment your body starts stabilizing. You've survived the surgeries long enough to stand upright again, and now you are herded into the chapel vaults of the fortress monastery. The air smells of oil, wax, and old stone. Candles flicker against statues of the Emperor, of the Primarch, and of heroes whose names you can't yet pronounce. The chaplains take over here. They are not gentle teachers. Their Crozius strikes of punctuation. Their voices are gravel, and their sermons roll over you until your ears ring. You are told that the Emperor is your father, your master, and your reason to exist. You are told the chapter is your new bloodline. You are told to abandon your old name, your old family, and your old loyalties. You obey, because hesitation is punished. Lore masters still debate whether this indoctrination is faith or control. Some claim it binds Space Marines into a brotherhood stronger than chains. Others call it brainwashing that strips away identity. Historians still argue whether the Primarchs themselves believed in such rituals, or if this was a later invention to keep their sons obedient. After the heresy, you learn litanies by rote, the canticle of protection before sleep, the prayer of the bold before firing ranges, the litany of endurance before surgeries. Chaplains test you by waking you in the night, demanding the full recitation. Fail, and punishment follows, sometimes extra drills, sometimes lashes, sometimes nothing but a cold look that hurts more. Trivia for you. The Black Templars take this step further. Their initiates are bound to veteran sponsors who personally drill them in oaths and scripture. The relationship is part mentorship, part cult conditioning. It works. Black Templars are infamous for their zealous fury. Ritual fills every corner of your new life. You eat in silence while a brother reads from the codex. You polish your training blades with oils blessed by the chaplains. Even your pain has ritual when fever hits from the implants. You recite the Emperor's name on every breath until it passes. You don't question why. You don't have the space to. Historians still argue whether faith makes Astartes better warriors. Some point to the Ultramarines, whose rigid structure produces disciplined mice, others to the word-bearers. whose obsession with belief led them into heresy. Faith, it seems, can elevate or destroy, but in the eyes of your chapter, doubt is death. The chapel walls tell stories in carvings and tapestries. You see scenes of the Great Crusade, where golden-armored giants marched across the stars. You see demons struck down in flame. You see martyrs kneel in before the throne. The art is propaganda, but it also shapes your imagination. You stop dreaming of home. You start dreaming of war. And yet, in quiet moments, fragments of your old life creep in. A feudal recruit remembers the sisters. Laughter. A hive recruit recalls the taste of real food instead of protein paste. Some whisper these memories in the dark, like confessions, chaplains. Hear and stamp them out. Memory of the pastors. Weakness. The only memory allowed is that of the emperor's will. The chaplains also drill into you the sacred duty of sacrifice. You are told your life is already spent, that you exist only to kill. In the emperor's name, if you live, good. If you die, better. Your worth is not measured by happiness, but by service. You start to believe it not because you want to, but because repetition burns. Belief into bone. A joke makes its way among aspirants. Faith heals all wounds, except when it doesn't. Nobody laughs aloud. Day by day. The rituals blur into instinct. You no longer question why you kneel before the Primarch's statue each morning. You no longer think twice about intoning litanies before drills. The cult has done its work. You are not just flesh transformed your mind. Reshaped. And when the chaplains are satisfied that you can pray, obey, and chant without pause, they hand you over to the next phase. Indoctrination. If the cult stripped away your past, the machines are about to overwrite what remains of your mind. Quick correction. I should have searched primary sources before I began this sequence. I've done that now and used canonical summaries. To keep this section accurate, you lie back in a chair while the world knows to hum. Machines breathe over you. A headpiece of glass and fine wiring settles round your temples. The room is dark except for slow, pulsing runes on the walls. This is hypno-indoctrination, a slow, clinical overwrite of what you used to be and of how you will think as a Marine. Lore masters still debate whether hypno-indoctrination was a wartime innovation or an early part of Astartes training, but its role is clear: to make you obedient and to graft chapter doctrine and reflexes directly into reflex. Lexicon +1. The technique blends sensory manipulation, data ritual, and long repetition. You hear litanies in a language that scrapes at the back of the throat. Images flash. The chapter's heraldry. Battle formations, kill counters, commands look like a metronome. Sleep learning is a thing here. When you doze, the implants feed you battle drills, and when you wake, the drills feel like memory. This isn't mystical possession. It's conditioned reflex, and it works because the gene seed makes your brain unusually plastic to targeted stimuli. Lexicon +1. Not every chapter runs the machine the same. Some use hypnoshrines, meditative data vaults that reinforce skills and doctrine over weeks. Others prefer blunt stimulus, days of solitary confinement, followed by sudden immersion into live combat with no prep. The Raven Guard favor stealth form conditioning, while Ultramarines run codified doctrine drills. You can taste the difference in the training. One kind hardens your mind like foot steel. The other polishes it into a precise instrument. Historians still argue whether different methods produce better warriors or merely different sorts of obedience. Lexicon +1. The tech is basic and terrifying. Neural hawks that read microsignals, hypnotic audio that targets subcortical loops, and targeted pharmacology to low resistance. Librarians and chaplains monitor for heretical or unstable thoughts. If the mind shows corruption, they prune, interrogate, or reroute memory pathways. Psychers amplify or shield the process where available, adding psychic reinforcement for stability. That's not universal. Some chapters lack librarian support and rely entirely on mechanical or pharmacological techniques. The variability matters because it changes what the training leaves behind. Warhammer40K.fandom.com+1 You're not just taught to shoot or to kill. Indoctrination teaches hierarchy, ritual responses, and emotional gating. You learn when to flare with fury and when to hold the line until reinforcement arrives. You learn to treat orders as if they were your own idea, a dangerous efficiency. The goal is automaticity. You react the correct way before thought filters in. That's why the process is as much about religion and myth as it is about muscles and reflexes. It binds you to the chapter's narrative and makes that narrative feel personal. Lexicon: a quirky bit of trivia. Some fortress monasteries keep hypnologues, old recordings of failed indoctrinations used as training aids. They play back where recruits broke down, so new initiates can watch mistakes like cautionary films. It sounds grim. It is. It also works. Another oddity. Certain chapters use the sound of their own forges or battle horns woven into the loop so recruits associate stress with ritual breathing patterns. That sensory anchor makes discipline instinctive. Lexicon on live effects hit slowly, like a drip you stop noticing until it floods the room. At first you feel sharper. Commands land like hooks. You can recall formation calls without thinking. Your fear recedes. Your willingness to obey grows. The danger is subtle. A man who obeys without question becomes excellent at his job, and also less himself. There are recorded instances, notably during the Horus Heresy, when accelerated indoctrination tried to compress decades of experience into weeks to meet desperate manpower needs, and the results were mixed. Some recruits gained unnerving competence, while others fractured under the pressure. Warhammer40K.fandom.com+1 You form rituals under the hum of the shrines. You start muttering litanies in sleep. You keep a small ritual before every feed. One small joke among neophytes. If the brain's rewired, does caffeine still work? It gets nervous laughs. Another. Chaplains don't do bedtime stories. They do bold rounds. And one more because people always ask for a third. Shrine playlists probably lack a shuffle button. Try not to snort. It's frowned upon. Not all indoctrination is mechanical. Some chapters place veterans into the training loop. Mentors who talk, correct, and shape by example. The human touch can be as effective as any trance apparatus. Several sources note how cultural practice changes outcomes. Some chapters produce zealous, single-minded brothers, and others produce clinical tacticians who follow orders with near mathematical precision. This variance explains why Astartes chapters differ as dramatically as their colors. Lexicon +1 When the process ends, you do not wake the same. Reflexes sit beneath thought. Your sleep thins and becomes a place for rehearsals, not rest. You recall orders like memories you made. You also lose things, small tastes, private jokes, the exact shape of a childhood lullaby. You trade them for a tight soldier mind. Whether that trade is mercy, crime, or both remains a matter of debate among imperial sociologists and battlefield priests. Lexicon +1 You stand, dizzy, and try to hum a tune you vaguely remember. It frays. Instead you find yourself reciting the chapter's battle chant and aligning your stance without thinking. The headpiece clicks open. They remove the gear. The indoctrination has done its work. You listen. You obey. You are ready for the next thing. The black Karapochi and a life where machine and body speak the same language. Warhammer40K.fandom.com You remember the chaplain's gravel. Voices from the chapels. The same litanies now loop in the shrine machines. It is a callback. Faith and circuits doing the same work. binding you to the chapter twice over. The black Karapochi waits, until you are ready, or at least, until you're no longer dying every other day from the other implants. Apothecaries call it the final barrier between human and Astartes. You lie once again on the steel slab, light burning into your eyes, as they prepare the surgery that will decide whether you ever wear the armor you've glimpsed in statues and murals. Lore masters still debate whether the black Karapochi was the Emperor's crowning invention or a dangerous concession to machine reliance. Without it, you would remain a man in armor. With it, you become fused to the armor itself, turning power plate into a second skin. Historians still argue whether the Primarchs themselves bore carapaces or whether theirs were built into their unique biology. No record confirms either claim, which keeps the debate alive in Mechanicus halls. The surgery is not a single implant, but thousands. The black Karapochi is a thin, black layer inserted beneath your skin, studded with neural plugs. The apothecaries slice channels into your torso and limbs, embedding the flexible mesh across nerves. From these plugs, small sockets protrude just beneath the skin. When you later climb into power, armor, cables and fiber links from the suit connect directly into these sockets. Thought becomes command. Reflex becomes motion. The pain is not sharp but crawling. Imagine ants made of fire walking. Under your skin, you feel them every time the apothecary threads another strip into place. You cannot scratch. You cannot move. You can only twitch against the restraints. Some aspirants scream until their throats tear. Others pass out from the shock. Failure here is absolute. If your body rejects the black Karapochi, you will never wear the armor. At best, you might remain as a failed servitor. At worst, you are dissected for salvage. Trivia here. The plugs can sometimes be felt through the skin's tiny bumps. Some chapters tattoo over TH. M. Weaving heraldry into the lines of plugs as a mark of pride. The flesh tearers are known to burn scars over theirs, branding themselves permanently. Ultramarines prefer surgical neatness, leaving little visible. Once healed, you undergo interface drills. You are strapped into training rigs wired like armor interiors. At first, you move clumsily. The thought-to-action link is overwhelming. Raise your arm, and the rig overshoots, nearly breaking your shoulder. Turn your head, and servo swine to fast. The black Karapochi does not just listen to you, it demands you learn a new rhythm of movement. Historians still argue whether this moment is when a Marine truly ceases to be human. Until now, your body was modified, your mind reshaped, but your nervous system was still your own. With the black Karapochi, machine and flesh blur forever. Some scholars say this was the Emperor's final betrayal of humanity, binding men to armor so they could never again walk the stars as free beings. Others call it liberation, a tool that allows warriors to fight beyond mortal limits. Your first live trial comes when they let you touch power armor. Not full plate, yet just a training shell stripped of weapons. You step into it, and the armor hums alive. The weight vanishes as servos match your stride. For the first time, you feel what it means to be more than flesh. You move, and steel moves with you. Your heart races. Even the chaplains cannot mask the significance. But you are not yet granted the full suit. Scouts wear lighter protection armored plates strapped over fatigues, less machine. More cloth. The black Karapochi is ready. But the chapter does not trust you with sacred relics yet. First, you must prove you can fight with nothing but the training armor and your sharpened body. In the barracks, whispers run between aspirants. Some test their sockets by jamming metal rods into them, just to feel the nervous jolt. Others claim they can sense machine spirits whispering when the plugs warm. You don't know if that's truth or delirium. You do know your skin itches constantly, as though your body still doesn't agree with the Karapochi lodged inside it. One joke makes the rounds, scratched hard, and you'll tune into the Mechanicus hymn broadcasts. It gets a few chuckles, even from those doubled over with fever. The surgery scars ache for months, but gradually you adjust. The plugs feel less alien. Your movements in the rigs become precise. You are now compatible. The apothecaries mark you ready for battlefield integration. The last barrier is gone. You are no longer just a boy with implants. You are a soldier wired to armor, part of a war machine that spans 10,000 years. The Black Karapochi has made you an Astartes in waiting. And now the chapter hands you your first weapon, your first uniform, and your first step into combat, the stripped-down honor of a scout. The scout phase begins the moment the apothecaries stop, carving into you, and the chaplains step aside. You are handed fatigues reinforced with light plates and a weapon that feels too heavy for anyone outside these walls. You're not a full space marine, yet you're a scout, and that means you fight half-armored, half-prepared, half-trusted. The chapter won't waste sacred suits of power on unproven flesh. You wear rags compared to the shining ceramite you've glimpsed in murals, but to you, it feels like being crowned. Lore masters still debate whether the scout company exists for practical reasons or ritual humiliation. Some argue it's efficient. Young recruits are less likely to survive battle, so it's smarter to risk them in lighter gear where speed counts more than durability. Others believe it's a deliberate lesson in humility, forcing you to bleed without the armor you crave. Historians still argue whether this practice originated with the Codex Astartes or earlier traditions. Some non-Codex chapters skip the scout phase entirely, throwing their initiates straight into battle plate, and somehow those recruits survive all the same. You are drilled in infiltration, sabotage, and reconnaissance, unlike the glory-drenched images of charging Astartes. Scouts move in shadows. You learn to paint your armor with ash, to smother footsteps on Faircrete, to wait motionless for hours with your rifle pointed at a single doorway. You become the eyes and ears of the chapter, slipping into enemy lines to mark targets, sabotage supplies, or cut throats before dawn. Trivia here. Some chapters don't even call them scouts. The Raven Guard refer to theirs as shadows, while the Space Wolves often nickname theirs fangs. The practice differs, but the function remains. You are the knife in the dark, not the hammer in daylight. Your weapon is usually a bolt gun cut down to carbine size, or, more often, a sniper rifle. You're told the bolt gun is a relic, sacred ammunition in every shell, and you don't waste a shot. The sniper rifle, though, is your true tool. It kills quietly, without drawing fire. You learn to measure wind across ruined cities, to time your breathing with the beat of your reinforced heart, and to squeeze without hesitation. A chaplain once tells you, a miss is heresy. Nobody laughs. Historians still argue whether scouts see more death than full marines. On paper, you are given fewer heavy weapons, less protection, and more dangerous roles. Casualty reports suggest scouts vanish often, listed as missing or fallen. Yet some scholars claim experience breeds sharper warriors, men who value stealth as much as strength. They point to the Raven Guard's legendary ambushes and argue that without the scout tradition, the Imperium would lose a vital edge. The scout company becomes your brotherhood. You march, eat, fight, and bleed together. Rivalries burn fierce. Who fires truer? Who stalks quieter? Who wins more kills in the mess hall? You exchange war stories, some true, some exaggerated. A running joke forms. If we're the eyes of the chapter, why do we keep walking into ambushes? Even the sergeants smirk at that one. Before they punish you with extra drills, you're not spared indoctrination either. Chaplains follow you into the field, leading prayers before each mission. You learn to daub your forehead with ash before combat, whispering the Emperor's name into your scope. Some scouts etch kill tallies into their rifle stocks, though officially this is frowned upon. The cult never fully loosens its grip. But there are cracks away from the fortress monastery. You glimpse the galaxy again. Hives choking with smoke, frontier worlds barely clinging to survival, cities under siege where civilians scream. You will name as savior and curse you as tyrant in the same breath. For the first time since you were taken, you see the Imperium with your own eyes, and you realize it's not the shining dream the chaplains preached. It's a grind of survival, misery, and war without end. One of your sergeants mutters that lesson out loud. Don't look for the Emperor's light in the gutter. Your job is to kill, not to think. You don't argue. Thinking has never been rewarded here. You survive your first firefights because of training, not armor. You crouch in ruins, holding your breath as orcs stomp past. You watch a fellow scout trip a mine and vanish in red mist. You shoot cultists in the spine before they know you're there. It's not glorious. It's not even clean. But it is real, and it proves you can fight. The scout phase lasts years. Some never graduate, dying in the shadows or failing to meet expectations. Those live long enough, kill efficiently enough, and obey without hesitation. Earn a prize greater than medals or feasts. You earn the right to climb into true power armor. By then, your sockets itch for a connection. Your black Karapochi hungers for the interface. The scut armor starts to feel like a mockery cloth and plates rattling against your skin when you know you were meant for something more. You endure, because patience is part of the trial. When the chapter finally calls you forward, when the sergeant tells you the armor is yours, you step into the reliquary where suits wait on racks like silent giants. You realize this was always the path. The scut phase was not just training. It was proof that you could live and kill without protection. And now, the armor is no longer withheld. The day you are granted power armor feels less like a reward and more like a verdict. You are led into the armory, where rows of suits stand in silence, each one a relic, each one older than your entire bloodline. The air smells of machine oil and incense. Tech Marine shuffle among the racks, their red robes whispering, megadendrites twitching as if the armor itself were alive. For the first time, you are face to face with the thing your black Karapochi was built for. Lore masters still debate whether power armor is a gift of the Emperor or a prison of steel. Some describe it as liberation. It takes your strength and multiplies it, makes you a god among mortals. Others call it a cage, forever binding your body to war until death. Historians still argue whether the first suits came from the Emperor's design or whether fragments were scavenged from pre-imperial technologies. The Mechanicus insists only they hold the sacred schematics, but records are suspiciously incomplete. The process of bonding begins slowly. You don't simply step into a suit and march away. The Tech Marines anoint the plates with sacred oils, whispering litanies to coax the machines. RIT awake, the chaplain recites a prayer of dedication. You, stripped to the waist, stand in the middle of it all like a condemned man awaiting sentence. When the first plate is lowered onto your body, the plugs of the black Karapochi spark. Alive, cables bite into sockets, nerves flare, and for a heartbeat you feel like your skin is tearing apart. The suit feels heavy at first, hundreds of kilograms of ceramic press onto your frame. But as the seals lock, the machine spirit responds, the weight vanishes, you move, and the armor moves with you. It amplifies your stride, steadies your grip, even balances your breathing. You are no longer a man inside a shell, you're one creature, hybrid of flesh and machine. Trivia for you. Many chapters maintain naming traditions for their suits. Some armor carries inscriptions, hundreds of years old, marking the deeds of brothers long dead. When you inherit a suit, you inherit its legacy. A scratch on the pauldron mayhem, a duel with Eldar, a dent in the greave might trace back to the siege of Rex. Wearing it ties you not just to your chapter, but to its entire history. But before you feel pride, there is pain. The armor punishes hesitation. Early drills are filled with mistakes, stepping too fast, turning too slow, gripping weapons too tightly. The feedback loop from the black Karapochi magnifies every error. You trap, the suit overcorrects, and you nearly crush yourself under servo pressure. Tech Marines watch without sympathy. Adapt, they say, and you do, because the alternative is being broken inside your own shell. Historians still argue whether this armor is the greatest strength of the Adeptus Astartes or their greatest weakness. In theory, every suit is a masterpiece, but the Imperium struggles to maintain them. Forge worlds produce fewer suits with each passing century. Chapters fight over scraps, trading relics like currency. Some argue that without armor, Space Marines are still lethal. Others say armor is the only thing keeping them godlike in the eyes of the common man. You spend months, sometimes years, learning to wear it as naturally as skin. You practice fury in bolters while the armor absorbs recoil. You march for days without food because the suit recycles waste. You sleep standing when needed, armor locked in place. Slowly, you stop noticing the servo swing. The armor's hum becomes background, like your own pulse. But you also learn the armor has moods. The machine spirit is fickle. If you neglect maintenance or fail to offer rights, the suit stiffens, locks, or glitches at the worst time. Tech Marines claim the machine remembers slights. Chaplains claim its faith being tested. You don't argue either way. You just keep the rituals. Jokes creep back into the barracks. Scratch your Karapochi wrong, and your armor sulks for a week. Or at least the armor doesn't snore. Gallows humor softens the endless training. The first time you march into public in full plate, civilians drop to their knees. You hear their prayers, their awe, their fear. You realize the suit does more than protect, it transforms you into a symbol. Without armor, you are another soldier. With it, you are a demigod. And yet, the chapter reminds you, this is still only a step. Armor is not the end. You have not earned the title of full battle brother yet. You may wear the suit, but your true proving ground lies ahead, in the crucible of battle. Until then, you are half-proven powerful, but untested. Now that you wear the armor, the chapter turns you into a weapon. Training shifts from survival to dominance. You no longer crawl in shadows as a scout. You charge. You strike. You kill at close range. The sergeants stop calling you initiate and start calling you brother, but the word is conditional. You feel it every time they say it. Lore masters still debate whether the training of an Astartes is more brutal than the implants themselves. The surgeries break your body, but the drills break your will and rebuild it into something colder. Historians still argue whether the Codex Astartes prescribes too rigid a form of training, binding chapters to a one-size-fits-all model. Non-Codex chapters like the Space Wolves reject it entirely, shaping their initiates through tribal hunts and blood duels. Both methods produce killers. The question is whether discipline or instinct breeds better warriors. Your days are measured in weapons. Morning is bold to drill. You learn the feel of the sacred weapon, the rhythm of its recoil, the prayer to whisper before each burst. Afternoon is blade work. You practice with combat knives, chain swords, and power swords. You spar against brothers until armor cracks and flesh bruises. Night is discipline under fire. You march through live fire ranges where servitors rain ammunition overhead. You stumble. You rise, you keep moving. Sleep comes in scraps, usually with bolter oil still on your hands. Trivia here. Many chapters use their own kill houses, mock battlefields built inside the fortress monast. The Imperial Fists famously construct labyrinthine kill zones where initiates must fight blindfolded or with weapons deliberately sabotaged. Their training record shows one of the highest casualty rates outside the battlefield. It's said the Fists Consider it a mercy. Better to bury a brother at home than see him fail in war. Your sergeants bark that you must become ambidextrous. You learn to fire left-handed when your right arm locks, to fight blind when visors crack, to sprint with armor sealed in combat lockdown. Drills blur reality until you can't tell if this is training or war. Sometimes you suspect the sergeants prefer it that way. Historians still argue whether this relentless drilling is sustainable. Some records from the Great Crusade suggest recruits then were trained for only months before being deployed. Out of sheer need, modern chapters spend years, sometimes decades, before granting full status. Critics point out the Imperium bleeds wars faster than it produces Marines. The answer from the chapters is always the same: quality over numbers. Even if it damns a million worlds, in the process you learn battlefield doctrines as well as weapons. How to drop from orbit in pods. How to fight in vacuum. How to kill Xenos whose physiology defies human logic. You memorize weak points of Orcs, Tyranids, Eldar. You rehearse squad manoeuvres until you can predict your brothers. Steps without a word. Communication becomes instinct. The chaplains don't vanish. Between drills, they remind you of oaths. They teach you battle cries. They test your faith by ordering you to fight. While reciting scripture, if you stumble on the words, the sergeant slams you harder in the sparring pit. Faith and strength are not separate lessons, they are fused into one. Jokes survive here too. Dry and bitter, if the Emperor wanted us to sleep, he wouldn't have made bolters so loud. The difference between training and war. In training, the ammunition is cleaner. Laughter lasts seconds, then the next drill begins. Over time, the armor stops feeling like a shell and starts feeling like home. You learn to strip and reassemble it blind. You will servos yourself when Tech Marines aren't looking. The hissing of seals, once alien, now comforts you like breath. You begin to understand why Marines rarely remove their armor in front of outsiders. It's not just ceremony. It's because the armor has become part of them. But training has its graveyard. Every month, another brother collapses under strain. Another suit locks up and crushes its occupant. Another aspirant breaks in sparring and never rises again. Their bodies are carried out without ceremony. Their names are struck from the rolls. The chapter does not speak of failures. You learn the silence is deliberate. The less you think about it, the less likely you are to hesitate when the same fate hovers over you. You survive because you adapt. Your muscles stop tearing. Underweight, your lungs handle recycled air. Your mind accepts the chaplain's sermons without resistance. You grow sharper, harder, less like the boy who first walked into the fortress monastery. That boy is dead, and yet you're still not a full battle brother. The chapter reminds you constantly. The armor, the training, the weapons, these are preparations. The only true test is war. Until you face real enemies and kill in the Emperor's name, you remain unfinished. Training ends not with graduation, but with deployment. When the sergeant finally announces the next step, you feel the weight shift. You are to be sent on campaign, not to the scout this time, but as an armored warrior. It's not a test range. It's a war zone. That is where your fate will be decided. Deployment comes without ceremony. One day you're in the training halls, fists bloodied from sparring, lungs burning from another forced march. The next, you are standing in the embarkation bay, watching Thunderhawks hum with energy and servitors loading crates of ammunition. Your sergeant hands you a bolter, fully loaded, and says only, "This time it counts." Lore masters still debate whether the first battlefield is meant to Baptist or to Col. Some claim the chapter deliberately throws fresh Astartes into the thickest fighting, testing whether their bodies and faith hold. Others argue it's simply necessity. The Imperium has too many wars and too few Marines. Historians still argue whether primarchs in the Great Crusade had patience for such gradual seasoning, or if they hurled their sons into the storm without hesitation. The drop is violent. Your pod screams through the void, slamming into atmosphere like a comet. The restraints cut into your armor. Brothers round you mutter prayers or grind teeth in silence. When the pod lands, the doors blast open, and war greets you in a wave of fire, smoke, and screaming. You don't have time to hesitate. The sergeant's voice cuts through the vox, barking orders. You move, and your armor amplifies every step. Bolter raised, you fire into a mob of cultists, their bodies tearing apart under explosive rounds. The recoil slams into you, but the suit compensates, guiding your stance. The first kill comes easier than you expected. The second feels almost natural. Trivia here. Some chapters keep the helmets off for first deployments, forcing initiates to see the battlefield with their own eyes. The Blood Angels are notorious for this, believing that confronting the sight of blood and terror without filters strengthens discipline or weeds out the weak. Records suggest it leaves lasting impressions, sometimes scars deeper than the flesh. Historians still argue whether starts Luther. Humanity here, in the first real taste of war, before now, you were trained, drilled, indoctrinated. But there was still a sliver of choice on the battlefield. Choice vanishes. You kill or you die. You obey or you break formation. Many scholars point to this as the moment individuality dissolves completely, replaced by the collective rhythm of the chapter. The campaign is chaos. Orcs swarm the trenches, bellowing, their bodies soaking up round after round. Cultists scream hymns to their dark gods as they rush Lascan lines. The ground shakes with artillery. You march through it step after step, firing, reloading, chanting litanies until they blow with the thunder of battle. Between skirmishes, you notice something the chaplains never mentioned. Civilians stare at you, with a mix of awe and terror. Some kneel as you pass, whispering prayers. Others hide, afraid you'll notice them. You realize you're not just a warrior, you are a symbol. To them, you are both, savior and executioner. That awareness never quite leaves. You also notice the veterans. Full battle brothers fight beside you, their movements flawless, their faith unshaken. Where you stumble, they flow. Where you hesitate, they cut through the enemy without pause. Watching them is both inspiration and humiliation. You understand how far you still have to go. In downtime, you sit with your squad, armor scarred from the last clash. The jokes still serve us, even here. At least in training, the targets didn't shoot back. Or, if the Emperor protects, why do we need armor? The humor is dry, but it keeps despair at bay. You begin to see patterns in the war. Orcs charge in waves. Cultists strike at supply lines. Tyrannid spores always come before. The claws. Training suddenly makes sense. Every lecture, every endless drill, every sparring match, they all prepared you for these moments. You act without thinking, and thinking would only slow you down. But the battlefield also teaches what the fortress never did. Fear. The first time you see a brother torn apart. The first time an enemy shrugs off your best shot. The first time artillery hits. Too close, you feel the fear in your gut. Chaplains will tell you fear is heresy. But on the line, you learn the truth. Fear is real. The differences. You act anyway. The campaign stretches on. Each battle shaves away hesitation. Each mission teaches lessons no training hall could. You stop flinching at screams. You stop caring about names on casualty lists. You march, you fight, you kill. And somewhere in that process, you realize the chapter has achieved its goal. You no longer think of yourself as human. You are a weapon. The sergeant watches, measures, judges. He knows when you're ready. Not because of a score or a test, but because you stop needing correction. You act as a Marine acts. That is when he tells you. You've earned the next step, and with those words, the war zone fades into background noise. What matters now is the chapter's recognition. You are about to cross the line between initiate and battle. E-brother. Recognition does not come in the field. It comes when the campaign ends and you return to the fortress monastery. Armor scarred, body exhausted, and mind sharper than it has ever been. You march into the great hall with the other survivors standing beneath banners older than empires. The chaplains, apothecaries, and captains wait in silence. The ceremony begins without explanation, because explanation is for those who doubt, and doubt has no place here. Lore masters still debate whether this ritual is a coronation or a funeral. Some argue that the initiation marks the death of your humanity, the burial of the boy you once were. Others insist it is a rebirth, the final shedding of weakness in favor of eternal service. Historians still argue whether such rites were ever conducted during the Great Crusade, or if they emerged later as chapters became isolated and needed ways to bind new brothers into the fold. You are called forward one by one. The chaplain asks you to recite the oaths, not the litanies you've muttered 1,000 times, but the core vows: loyalty to the Emperor, loyalty to the chapter, loyalty to your brothers. You speak the words without pause. You do not stumble. Your voice echoes in the chamber. At the end, you kneel. The chaplain presses his crozius to your shoulder, and the captain declares you a battle-brother. It feels both monumental and strangely hollow. Monumental because you have survived where so many did not. Hollow because you understand now that this was never about you. The chapter doesn't celebrate you as an individual, it celebrates you as another blade in its arsenal. The ceremony binds you not to yourself, but to the collective. Trivia here: the Space Wolves do not use chaplains for this moment. Instead, their wolf priests mix the role of medic and priest, and the oaths are sworn over the blood of a fresh kill, often a great beast hunted by the initiates themselves. To them, the ritual is less about submission and more about proving worth to the pack. Historians still argue whether this is the point where free will ends. You can still think, still joke, still recall fragments of your old life. But when the chapter speaks, you obey. Your identity is wrapped in heraldry, armor, and duty. Some scholars claim the conditioning is so deep that even if you wished to rebel, your body would resist. Others argue that traitor legends prove free will remains, twisted though it may be. After the oaths, you are given the final mark, your armor painted in full chapter colors. Until now, you wore unadorned plate, functional but plain. Now, the heraldry of the chapter spreads across your pauldrons and chest. You see your reflection in polished ceramite, and for the first time, you look like the giants you once dreamed of. It feels earned, and it feels heavy. You stand with your brothers, a full company arrayed in silence. The chaplain proclaims that you are now eternal, your life already spent in service. The captain welcomes you not with praise, but with the promise of war. The apothecary reminds you that your body is no longer yours, it belongs to the chapter. The tech marine warns that your armor is not yours either, it belongs to the machine spirit. Everything that you are, everything that you were, has been consumed. Jokes whisper through the ranks even in this solemn moment. At least they didn't make us pay for the paint. Now that we're battle brothers, maybe they'll let us sleep. The laughter is quiet, almost nervous, but it's there a reminder that even indoctrinated weapons find cracks to let humor slip through. But the truth lingers. You are no longer an aspirant. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer half-trained, half-trusted. You are a space marine. The chapter has branded you as such. The galaxy will see you as such, and from this point on, you carry not just the weapons and armor, but the full weight of the Imperium's expectations. The ceremony ends as abruptly as it began. The chaplains dismiss you. The banners fade into shadow, and you march out not as boys, not as scouts, but as brothers in arms. You feel taller, heavier, harder. You feel ready. And in the quiet that follows, when you finally sit alone in your cell, you realize the last transformation has taken place. The boy who once walked into the fortress is gone. The man who stands now is something else entirely. The Emperor's weapon, the chapter's property, a battle brother of the Adeptus Astartes. The transformation is not complete until you wield your true. Armor, power armor, is not handed out like a ration. It is issued piece by piece, sanctified and recorded. You receive yours in a chamber filled with incense, machinery, and the murmurs of tech marines. Each suit has a history, every plate carrying the scars of past campaigns. You do not wear new armor, you inherit it. Lore masters still debate whether the first MK2 suits were crafted to preserve life or to trap the warrior in duty. The armor enhances you, sustains you, even feeds you, but it also weighs more than any chain. Historians still argue whether the Emperor intended it as a tool of liberation, man elevated to godlike status, or as a prison, binding man forever to war. Your suit is brought forward by servitors. It does not look like it fits. The greaves are thick with sacred oils, the chest plate still humming with a low electrical growl. The tech marine chants in a low, mechanized voice. He touches runes and the armor shifts, like a beast stirring from sleep. You realize in that moment the armor is alive in its own way. Its machine spirit is temperamental, and you must earn its trust. Piece by piece, the armor is locked onto you. The sound is metallic and final, like the gates of a fortress slamming shut. The collar seals with a hiss. The gauntlets press into your hands, forcing your fingers to curl round invisible weapons. The backpack hums, the power unit warming against your spine. The helmet seals last, and the world changes. Vision narrows. Data feeds crawl across your sight, and your breathing is no longer yours, it is measured, filtered, amplified. Trivia here. The MK6 Corvus pattern, recognizable by its long-beaked helmet, was nicknamed Beaky by mortals who saw it. Few Astartes appreciate the joke, though some veterans secretly do. Armor is sacred, but humor slips through the cracks of reverence. The tech marine steps back. He watches to see if the machine spirit accepts you. Sometimes the armor resists, refusing to stabilize its systems. When that happens, the tech marine must perform rites until the spirit relents, or until another suit is chosen. Today, yours hums steady, and the runes glow green. You breathe again, heavier, slower, louder. You are not inside armor, you are part of it. Historians still argue whether this is the final stage of indoctrination. The armor restricts movement, vision, and even hearing, unless the machine spirit allows otherwise. Some scholars say it's a subtle reinforcement of obedience. You move whether armor permits. You hear what the chapter wants you to hear. But others insist it is a gift, a way to extend your life against weapons that would tear apart any unarmored soldier. You walk forward, each step amplified by servos and pistons. The sound echoes across the hall. You feel like you weigh twice as much, yet your movements flow with unnatural speed. It feels alien, and it feels right. The armor remembers battles you did not fight. Scratches across the greaves tell you of lost fire absorbed centuries ago. A dent on the pauldron hints at an orc's crude blade. You are a guest in its long history. The chaplain speaks again. He reminds you that this armor is not yours. It belongs to the chapter, to be reclaimed upon your death, repaired, and passed to another brother. You are a custodian, not an owner. That lesson settles deeper than the weight of Traumi. Jokes come again in hushed tones. Do not scratch it, they'll throw us back to scout armor. Finally, I can stand in the rain and not feel cold. Small laughs ripple through the ranks, quickly swallowed by silence as the tech marines glare. Humor is tolerated, never encouraged. The final test comes. When you raise your bolter, The recoil is immense, yet the armor absorbs it, stabilizing your stance. You fire round after round into the target, the thunderous bark filling the hall. You do not flinch. You cannot flinch. The armor steadies you. For the first time, you understand how this weapon becomes an extension of yourself. You stand in a line of new battle brothers, all clad in full armor. You look identical now. Your individuality erased beneath painted ceramic. To outsiders, you are faceless. To the chapter, you are a brother. To the Imperium, you are its angel of death. In that moment, you accept the truth. You will never again walk as a man. Every step, every breath, every battle will be taken as something more and something less. You are both elevated and diminished. You are eternal and expendable. You are a space marine. The first time you fight as a full battle brother, the difference is immediate. You march not as a scout, lurking in shadows, but as an armored giant standing in plain sight. The enemy sees you and breaks, or they don't break, and then they die. Either way, the weight of your armor and the roar of yore bold to turn you into a presence no mortal can ignore. Lore masters still debate whether this is where the indoctrination fully locks into place. The battlefield removes hesitation. You no longer think about survival the way you once did. You think only about execution. Target, fire, advance. Historians still argue whether Space Marines of the Great Crusade fought with more individuality, or if they too blended into a machine of war where the self meant little. The campaign takes you to a hive world racked with rebellion. You deploy from orbit, Thunderhawk shaking as it plunges through the polluted sky. When the ramp opens, you feel the difference. Scouts sprinted into cover. Marines stride down ramps in full view. Last fire bounces from your plate. Mortals scatter at your approach. For the first time, you sense the terror you inspire, and it works. You realize the armor is as much a weapon of fear as of protection. Trivia here. The Ultramarines are said to time their advances with clockwork precision, entire squads moving in perfect sync. Not just for efficiency, but to amplify dread. Civilians witnessing such unity describe it as unnatural. Like statues come alive. Your squad moves block by block. Rebels fire from rooftops and alleys. But your armor absorbs most of it. Bold to fire cuts swathes through their lines. The contrast is sharp. You are few, they are many. Yet you advance like a tide. The rebels try to rally, screaming slogans, raising crude banners. You tear them down without pause. Humor sneaks in between bursts of violence. One brother mutters over vox, "They thought barricades would stop us. How quaint." Another says, "If they keep shooting this much, maybe they'll actually scratch the paint." You laugh. A short, dry sound. Then step over the rubble of their failed defense. Historians still argue whether this stage is the point where humanity slips away. As a scout, you understood fear and exhaustion. Now, wrapped in ceramite, you feel almost nothing. You could march through fire and ash for days and not flinch. Some scholars insist this is where Marines lose empathy, where mortals become less. Burn shadows to you. Others argue that the bond to humanity never dies, it simply hides behind armor and training. You clear her blocks room by room. Doors burst open. Rebels inside freeze at the sight of you. Some surrender. Some try to fight. It does not matter. The Codex dictates efficiency. Neutralize resistance. Press forward. You follow without hesitation. You remember when hesitation cost you brothers as a scout. You won't repeat that. The campaign stretches for weeks. Each day feels like the last. March, engage, cleanse. At night, you sit in your cell within the Fortress Monastery's forward base. Armor stands on racks, still humming faintly. You eat, pray, and sleep, though not much. You wake ready to repeat the cycle. The simplicity is almost comforting. Trivia again. During the Horus Heresy, Some legions ran endless campaigns without pause. Records suggest some Marines fought for decades without a day of peace. The armor was their home, the battlefield their chapel, and war their only sustenance. For many chapters, little has changed since. One moment stands out. On the 15th day, you are ordered to hold a square against waves of rebels. They come in hundreds, screaming, firing wildly. You stand with your squad, bolters thundering, armor-absorbing fire. The square becomes a furnace of smoke, noise, and blood pass. But you do not falter. When reinforcements arrive, the rebels are broken corpses. Your squad stands as if rooted to the stone. For the first time, you realize why mortals call you angels of death. The battle ends, but your war does not. You have tasted life as a Marine. There is no returning to shadows. Scouts taught you patience. Power armor teaches you inevitability. You are no longer the knife in the dark. You are the hammer that never stops falling. The campaign winds down. The hive is pacified. Banners of rebellion burned. Leaders executed or fled into the wastelands. You march through ruined streets with your brothers, armor blackened with soot. Bolted barrels still warm. Civilians watch from doorways, some whispering prayers, others hiding their faces. You see both fear and awe, and you realize they are the same thing when directed at you. Lore masters still debate whether this is the point when a Marine truly understands his role in the galaxy. You are not here to win gratitude. You are not here to save lives. You are here to impose order at the point of a bolter. Historians still argue whether the Emperor envisioned this Orif. In becoming angels of death, his creations drifted from his plan. When the campaign ends, your chapter gathers in the fortress monastery. The halls echo with the stomp of ceramite boots. Banners hang heavy in incense smoke, and the chaplains speak the litanies of victory. You stand with your brothers, and you feel the final truth settle on you. You are eternal war-given form. The trials, the surgeries, the indoctrination, the oaths, this is where it was all leading. Trivia here. The salamanders, unlike most chapters, often walk among mortals after battle. They help, rebuild, carry survivors, and speak directly to the people they defend. Their humanity lingers longer than most. Other chapters see this as weakness, even indulgence, yet to those mortals. The salamanders are not monsters, they are guardians. Your own chapter may not grant such warmth. Your duty is finished when the enemy lies silent. You reflect on what has been taken. Your name is gone. Your past is irrelevant. Your body is remade. Your thoughts are guided. Everything you were has been stripped away until only the blade remains. And yet, there is pride. You did not fall in the trials. You did not falter as a scout. You did not break in battle. You stand here now, armored and armed, as Space Marine of the Adeptus Astartes. Historians still argue whether the price is too high. Some scholars whisper that the Imperium sacrifices its sons not for glory, but for survival, grinding them into weapons until nothing human remains. Others counter that. Without Space Marines, humanity would already be ash beneath the talons of Xenos and traitors. Both may be true. You no longer debate it. You live it. The fortress grows quiet after the ceremony. Brothers return to their cells. Chaplains fade into shadow. Tech Marines tend to the armories. You walk the corridors, your footsteps echoing against stone. Outside, the stars stretch endless. Somewhere out there, another war waits. You know your chapter will send you. You know you will march again. You do not question, and so the wheel turns, just as it has for 10,000 years. One boy's life ends, another battle brother rises. The Imperium does not pause to thank you. The galaxy does not slow. There is only the next deployment, the next war, the next sacrifice. You breathe within your armor, the machine spirit praying softly. You feel ready. You feel permanent, and in a quiet thought you dare not voice. You wonder how long eternity will last. The wheel slows, the story eases, the voice drops. Your eyes grow heavy as the thunder of bolters fades into silence. Picture the fortress monastery under the stars, banners swaying in incense. Smoke, the halls dim and echoing. The war is far away for a moment, and you walk those endless corridors with no weight in your steps. The armor does not crush you here, it holds you steady. Like the walls hold the fortress, like the stars hold the night. Let the noise of campaigns drift from your mind. Let the echoes of battle sink into the stone. The boy who once entered those gates is gone. Yes, but the brother who remains is calm. He walks in rhythm with countless others, eternal in his silence, steady in his purpose. Nothing presses, nothing demands, only the hum of the machine spirit, the faint flicker of candles, the distant chant of litanies some more to the stars than to men. Rest now. The bolter is silent, the armor is still, the galaxy spins, but for you. This moment pauses, your duty will call again. But not tonight. Tonight you stand in the great hall, one of many, yet whole within yourself. You are not lost, you are not broken, you are a brother of the Adeptus Astartes, and for now, the war is far away.